morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Carruthers, and I'm the Events Manager here at the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to Growth Basics for Business, a monthly breakfast seminar series which provides a forum to gain do-it-yourself workplace solutions and insightful, actionable tips. Today is our sixth event in the 2024-25 event series of Growth Basics for Business, and I want to thank Eaton Peabody for their continued support of this virtual event series again this season. This morning's topic, The Coaching Edge, Groundbreaking Leadership, is presented by Erica Duramo, founder and CEO of Piers Consulting. Today, Erica will explore why organizations like Google, NASA, and the U.S. military are investing in coaching culture, as a strategic priority. She'll cover the fundamentals of coaching, the challenges of the advice trap, and the benefits of building a coaching culture. We'll walk away from today's training with insights into practical steps for fostering coaching skills in leaders and leveraging coaching to enhance organizational performance. Now, like all the Chamber's virtual signature events, today's presentation is free and is being recorded. It will be made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, visit our website, portlandregion.com. Check out our events page and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Before we begin today, I just want to remind everyone that we're using a platform called StreamYard. This platform provides improved production and interactive elements that truly enhance our virtual events here at the Chamber. On that note, I'd like to point out that when you have questions for Erica this morning, you can type them in the YouTube chat throughout the presentation. Erica has reserved time at the end of her presentation for a Q&A session with everyone here, so please do not hesitate to engage in the chat. And now at this point, I'd like to introduce Nate Levesque, Director of Marketing for Eaton Peabody, our Growth Basics for Business series sponsor.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. I want to thank the Portland Chamber for doing such a great job of putting these together and providing new and engaging content month after month. I also want to thank our presenter, Erica, for joining us today. Lastly, whether this is your first Growth Basics event or your 10th, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. For those of you that may not be familiar with Eaton Peabody, we are a full-service, Maine-based law firm with nearly 30 attorneys serving Maine clients from offices in Augusta, Bangor, and Portland. We assist companies of all sizes in a variety of industries. So whether you're an established financial institution or a small business just taking your first steps, we can help with all of your legal needs. To learn more about the services that we provide in the industries that we serve, visit our website, eatonpeabody.com. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn, stay up to date on legal updates and future presentations. Thank you, and back to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Nate. Now, I don't want to take any more time away from our presenter this morning. Plus, I think everyone's heard enough from me. So with that, I'll hand things over to Erica. Erica, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Rachel. So today we'll be talking about the coaching edge. This is something that I feel deeply passionate about. In fact, I've dedicated my life to the practice of coaching. And I am so excited to talk about not just coaching, but how to develop a coaching culture in your organization. So, classic legal disclaimer, nothing that we present here should be used without consulting a professional. And I just put this in every single slide, every single presentation I do. We never know where people are at any given time. So, maybe take a note down, jot this down for folks who are, experiencing a long winter in Maine and maybe need some help. You never know. Topics today will not be super weighty, but will involve a little bit of introspection. So a little bit about Piers. We use a lot of maritime imagery. We are kind of the safe harbor. So we started out doing workshops and training for folks that worked in really remote, high stakes environments and maybe looked around and didn't see like a template for what would work for them, especially in terms of developing leadership skills. So you'll notice the plover is kind of our icon. We're all about going out into those high stakes environments, doing, going out of the harbor, getting what you need, tying up your boat, getting supplies, making patches, and then getting out there and doing what it is that you were called to do, what your organization was called to do, what you as a human were called to do. So we work with individuals and organizations to provide a variety of resources, whether that's training, coaching, or bespoke workshops like this one. And we work with executive leadership, group coaching, individual coaching, high performers, high potential employees, and organizational development and workforce engagement. So right now, there's definitely a lot of competition for talent. And when you get great talent into your organization, it's super important that you're really having those people engaged, showing up with all of the insights and bright ideas that they have to contribute. And we'll talk a lot about that with our discussion of coaching today. And then we also develop, one-off workshops, or we have a set of pre-developed kind of off-the-shelf workshops for some of the topics that affect everybody, but particularly are useful for folks who are navigating new environments. So things like handling high-stakes conversations, setting boundaries, self-advocacy, stuff like that. So a little bit about myself. This is a flashback to 2016. I can't believe that's almost 10 years ago. So this photo was taken off the west coast of Africa in Angola, coming up on International Women's Day soon in March. But this was the workplace that I was, this was my workplace at the time when I decided that I would pursue the realm of coaching. I was an operations team leader. My background is actually mechanical engineering. I joke that you can take the gal out of engineering. You'll never take the engineering out of the gal. I still, I feel like I get a lot of questions about, engineering to coaching. How does that make sense? Like those seem so different. And yet for me, coaching is really about problem solving and delving deep and getting to the root of the root of the challenge and finding the right answers for that system, for that person. So it goes perfectly hand in hand. I was second in command on this vessel. We had about 200 of us. There's one other woman in this photo, but usually I was the only woman offshore. And that was fine. But I realized when I was out there, that was my first big leadership role, that what had been shown to me as classic leadership styles didn't necessarily work when you took a helicopter to work and you wore steel-toed boots and coveralls. And so I had to figure out what would work for me. And there was plenty of advice out there. We're going to talk about advice a lot today. Plenty of advice about what I should and what I shouldn't do. And ultimately, I realized like we really, each person in this photo even needed their own unique path to their leadership style. This photo is comprised of folks at the team leader level who reported to me, supervisor level under that, lead technicians. We have kind of across the span medics in this photo, and everyone was finding their own way and what worked for them. So this is sort of the genesis. And I talk about like the moment, my aha moment, and it was when I was strapped into a helicopter seat, and every time before we took off, I would check in with myself and say, if this helicopter goes down, have I done what I want to do in the world? And one day we had a bunch of helicopter crashes in the industry. And the answer to that question suddenly became no, I hadn't. Like I felt like there was a lot of support that I could be giving to individuals based on what I had experienced over, at this point, I think it was about 15 years into my career. So moving on, let's talk about what's on deck today. So we're going to talk about the concept of coaching and clearly define it. We'll differentiate between different support types, and this is sort of debunking some of the myths around what coaching is. We'll understand, what value there is in developing a coaching culture in your organization beyond just, hiring coaches or training people to be coaches. And then we'll learn some practical coaching techniques. I'll give you sort of the basics so that you can hit the ground running and test some of this out today. And then we'll understand what other resources are available so that you can dig a little deeper. This is really just meant to be a little taster of what coaching is so that we can whet folks' appetites and they can go out into the world and maybe develop some of their own internal coaching skills or pair with a professional coach. Okay, so we've got some interactive polling, and you can just grab your camera and I'm going to clear responses. So grab your camera and follow that QR code. And then the question here is, when you hear the word coaching, what comes to mind? This is sort of a free association. It is anonymous. Your name will not come up. And then once I see this number on the right tick up after we've got a couple of answers, I'll share the responses. One thing that coaches are very aware of is bias, or as we like to use the term, heuristics, which get a bad rap sometimes, but really biases are our brain's way of keeping us safe, right? It's a fast track. It's fast thinking instead of slow logical thinking. And so one of the reasons that I don't show the answers until we've got a few responses is because anchoring bias will tend to lead us to whatever answers are already existing there. So remember that thought, because we're going to revisit that as we get into the content more. Okay, so mentorship, leadership, people development, leadership's coming through big, largely. Teaching, sports. Yes, sports is a big way that we conceptualize coaching. But I love that we've got some mentoring showing up here and the concept of teaching. So we are going to kind of sort through what these different elements are and what differentiates mentoring versus coaching. Are they interchangeable, or are the, like, what are the differentiators? But leadership's coming through big time. And and guiding, interesting that's also coming through strongly. So one of the questions that we get often is like, can leaders be coaches? Are leaders coaches? Does it work in the reverse? So we'll talk about some of that. What's the hierarchy in coaching? Okay, here we go. I'm maybe being a little bit cheeky with this question. So when receiving advice, how often do you think that's perfectly solved my problem? Give folks a chance to answer. I'm also recovering from like a little cold, so I'll be definitely hydrating throughout the session. Okay, we've got some answers. All right. So it looks like none of us have folks in our lives who are fortune tellers or perfectly good at giving advice 100% of the time. 0 to 20% of the time is kind of a big winner here. I'm impressed with the 20 to 40%. Y'all have some good folks in your life. And this middle band, I think, is maybe indicative of asking the right questions. So we're going to talk about that too. But essentially, even when we want advice, and even when we say, hey, can I ask you for some advice? So often that advice actually doesn't take into account all of the things we've tried, all of the subtleties of our context, all of the different reasons that we can't do X, Y, or Z, because that's all in our head, right? We are the experts of our own problem. And so even sometimes when we ask for advice and we say, like, I really respect you, I really want some advice, so often that advice falls flat. Now, what I know most of us do not like is the unsolicited advice. Nothing can kill a conversation faster sometimes than some unsolicited advice, even when it's framed with, can I give you some advice? I mean, I think that might even be worse, because like you're being co-opted into consent, even if you don't really want to give it. Okay, so what is coaching? So the International Coaching Federation, which is one of the, I think I can say this is the largest accrediting body for coaches. defines coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. So the process of coaching often unlocks previously untapped sources of imagination, productivity, and leadership. You'll see I bolded the word partnering. That's not bolded on the ICF website. And personal and professional potential I've bolded. So coaching really is not hierarchical. Coaching is side by side. It is the power dynamics are equal in coaching. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then personal and professional, I often get asked, are you a life coach, or are you like a career coach or a business coach? Ultimately, my training is topic agnostic. So I can coach on whatever topic is put in front of me. And for anyone who says that they are just a business coach or just a career coach, I think that that's fine for the niche. But in reality, all of us show up with our big, messy lives in and amongst everything else going on. And usually we are working to fulfill some greater need in our life, some potential or some financial needs. So detaching life from work is really kind of a fool's errand in many cases. Okay, so what's the difference between these types of support? We're going to kind of like fly through some of these slides because I know that you can reach out to me afterwards and ask me any questions or follow up on this. So we've got coaching, which we've talked a little bit about. We've got, and I'll differentiate further. We've got consulting. Consulting being where you pay an expert with subject matter expertise to come in and tell you what to do. So I am a coach and I am also a consultant, and I differentiate those two pretty significantly. And I will sometimes say, okay, I'm going to take my coaching hat off now and I'm going to put my consulting hat on, and I'm going to tell you what I think based on my lived experience or my subject matter expertise, what I think you should do. It's directive in nature, and you are paying not just for a thought partner, but for someone to sort of put that expertise on the line. Like many of us carry insurance for if we do happen to tell you to do the wrong thing and it goes poorly. Mentoring is similar to coaching in that it is relational in nature. It's usually informal. There are some formal mentoring programs, but you're not usually paying for mentoring. So it's relational in that way. And it's usually from someone who has more lived experience in that field. And again, will often entail advice. So there is a bit of a powerarchy. I think I just created a new word, a power dynamic or a hierarchy in mentoring. And it's perfectly appropriate for a mentor to say, this is what's worked for me. These are the things you should consider. That being said, it's great for mentors to have coaching skills so that they can turn that on and off as needed and make sure that they're accessing the full breadth of insight that their mentee has. Training is also very different from coaching. So training is about developing certain skills based on best practice, based on research, and based on structure. So it's very directive in nature, very structured, and has usually has a lesson plan, just like we're doing today. Therapy, I get asked a lot, like, well, do I need coaching or do I need therapy? It's like the classic meme, why not both? These two sources of support are similar in that they ask a lot of questions and in that they are client driven in terms of the client gets to decide where you go with it. They're different though, because therapy usually reflects on past injury or trauma, big T or little t trauma, and is therapeutic in nature. It's working to heal. It is administered by a licensed professional. Coaches are professionals and accredited, or should be. I'll say that. I think coaches should be accredited and held to a code of ethics and held to that accrediting body. They are not licensed, at least not yet, although it does look like it's going that way. And then there's friendship, right? There's our friends that we call up and we say, oh, I've just had this terrible experience. I'd love your thoughts. And, or even friendship in the form of our family sometimes. I don't know who here has had the experience of venting to a loved one and that loved one saying like, do you want me to help you solve your problem right now? Or do you just need to vent? Do you want me to listen? So that's some of those good like coaching skills actually coming into play. How can I support you? How best can I support you, rather than jumping in and trying to fix your problem? Because we all know how much we love that. It's usually like, well, I know how to fix my problem. That's not the issue. Um, so coaching is really, this is the one where the coach walks side by side with the client. So the client gets to say, the coach is sort of shining a flashlight, asking insightful questions, powerful questions, evoking awareness, maybe holding up a mirror at times. But we're sort of shining a flashlight along the path, and the client gets to decide if we go right or we go left. So it's completely client-led and client-driven. And that might feel a little uncomfortable to folks if they think that they're going to get a consultant who's going to tell them what to do. And instead, they're in a coaching relationship where the coach says, my opinion doesn't matter nearly as much here. What matters is what's right for you, because you are the expert on your lived experience. Okay, so that's the fundamentals of coaching as a practice, but like, how does this work in the workplace? Because we're not all professionally certified coaches. So how do we create a coaching culture, and why would we want to? Well, there are a lot of benefits. These benefits that I've put up here have been are what came through as the top benefits based on research from the Human Capital Initiative and the International Coaching Federation, and they are measurable benefits. And this research has been conducted over the span of quite a few years, going back to 2013 was the first report. And so we can see how organizations that embrace a coaching culture, have a strong coaching culture, how they measure up on some of these elements. So employee engagement, operational performance. They specifically cite financial performance, but we know that things go beyond just the money. Improved talent management. So you've got the talent, you've got them onboarded. What are you doing with them? How are you developing them? How are you rewarding them? Communication and collaboration, self-awareness and empowerment. Empowerment being a big one here. As anyone who either runs a small business or has a team of people that work for them, we all know what it's like to maybe delegate something to somebody, and then they come back, the next day and say, I didn't really understand that. Can you help me fix X, Y, and Z? Or does this look right? Should I fix it? Should I do X, Y, and what else should I do? That self-awareness and empowerment is a huge part of coaching. And it's one of the reasons that coaches, even when we sort of know what we think the answer might be, the point, every time we give an answer, that's actually disempowering to the person on the receiving end. We want people to feel confident and able and tap into their own resources to be able to answer their own problems. So you as a manager would really benefit from the people on your team having that self-awareness and empowerment. Leadership development, this is huge. Most of the people that I work with right now, most of the people I work with are actually in the federal government at the moment. They're all in relatively senior leadership roles across Air Force, NASA, Department of Transportation, and I've got clients at Google and Zendesk and some of these other organizations. But many of my clients are like technical people who are really, really good at the technical, and then came up through leadership. And maybe in that first level of leadership, it was okay for them to kind of get involved in the nitty gritty. And now they're at a point where they need to be looking at things strategically, and they're still kind of maybe still in the weeds, or they're trying to figure out team dynamics or empowerment or development or handling conflict. Adaptability and resilience. If folks on your team know how to embrace coaching culture, you can much better respond to the unknowns, to the unpredictable events. And I think anyone familiar with the term VUCA, there's a lot of volatility in the world. There will always be probably a lot of volatility in the world. So hugely important. And then improved retention. We spend a lot of time, energy, resources getting people on board. And when folks don't feel like they can thrive, look up self-determination theory after this, but when folks don't feel like they can thrive, tap into their own capabilities and their own intrinsic internal motivations, they leave. Even if you pay them well, if they don't have the right leadership, if they don't have the right support, they will leave. Or they'll just be waiting until it's financially feasible to leave. All right, so how do we know if you have a coaching culture? What are some of the indicators? And that's a classic coaching question. What are the indicators? It's an organization that values coaching, that dedicates resources to coaching, that focuses on development. I don't mean just of coaching, but actually on human development, provides training around this. And that doesn't need to be like a 1 week course, or it could just be something as simple as, a 30-minute lunch and learn. And then embraces continuous improvement. So this is a common thread. Rather than focusing on what's broken, really, learn quick, take those errors and apply them to the next thing, and fail fast, fail forward. So the mechanics, how do we actually do this? There's a model called the grown model, or the grow model. I've adapted it a little bit to the grown model. So it starts out with a goal. What are we hoping to achieve? Like, if you were to have a coaching conversation with me, if you were to have this conversation with, say, a direct report, or even a peer who's come to you and said, I just need some support here. Can you help me troubleshoot this? Or can you give me a different insight? Before you jump in and give them your opinion, just step back for a second and start asking these questions. So, like, what's the outcome that you want to achieve? What's the goal here? So often, I kid you not, that is not clear or known. Just asking that one question, if you could take one thing away from today, just ask, what's the outcome we want here? High stakes conversation. People are stressed about having a conversation with their manager or some direct report or somebody that they're not getting along with in the workplace. Thinking through, like, what's the outcome that I want from this conversation? What do I actually want to happen? That gets us in problem solving mode and past some of the fight or flight. And then how will you know? Like, what's an indication of success? If somebody says, I want to feel more comfortable about X, Y, and Z, how will you know? Maybe it'll be that your heart rate won't go up when you encounter that situation. Maybe it'll be a physical lightness that you feel. It doesn't need to be quantitative, but we'll often ask scaling questions, like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you want to feel? How do you feel now? And this is the other part. How do you feel now? Reality. So where are we at right now? What's the current situation? And what do we know? What do we know about and what we've got right now? And what information do we not know? What's missing? Maybe we've got hypotheses in the place of facts, and that's okay. Then what options do you have so far? This is when you come across anxiety, one of the best questions you can ask is, what options are available right now? Get action oriented and get focused on what is possible. What can you do? Folks often end up focused on all the things that they can't do, which is very disempowering. But what can you do right now? And what have you tried so far is a great question. What have you learned from what you've tried so far is another great follow-up question. So when somebody comes to you for advice and they say, like, oh, I just don't know how to tackle this, before you jump in with the thing that they've already tried, ask them, what have you tried so far? What did you learn from that? And then what actions will we take? So this is the will. This is, future focused. And as you're thinking through what actions you'll take, what might get in the way of that? So often I say, like, I hear clients say something like, I just need to. That's my red flag. I just need to. Usually that means there's some task out there that seems trivial or seems like it should be easy, and yet it's sat on the to-do list for a long time. I just need to me, is code for something is getting in the way. Either it's motivation or resources or clarity around what it is I'm actually trying to do here. And so we avoid it. And then what's the commitment? That might even look like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how motivated are you feeling about this action? And if somebody says 3, okay, well then what could bring it to a 4? What would be more empowering, or what would be more motivating? All right, thinking ahead. Next, I've added the N here for next. Usually when I wrap up, I think it's great, and this is in any kind of conversation, like, what should we be thinking about in the future? Because starting to think about that next horizon is a really helpful way to, put ourselves into the future and place ourselves in that future reality and start thinking through, like, what do I need to be thinking about going forward? I do want to mention too, this goal, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but I talk about higher order goals and primary goals. A lot of times somebody will say something like, my goal is to get a promotion. Okay, that's a first order goal in my opinion. That's the near term tactical goal. What is, and there's probably even more tactical things that sit underneath that. What is the higher order goal though? Like, what is it that you are really trying to achieve here? And promotion is a perfect example, because it might be, I'm trying to have more impact in the organization, or I'm trying to get the recognition that I feel I deserve, or a promotion would give me the financial stability to know that my kids can go to college. So there are different whys that sit underneath that goal, and understanding what the higher order goal is really important, because there might be different hows for how we get to that goal. And the more you can broaden, then the more options you have at the table. So again, classic engineering, right? Like, we're trying to fix this one little issue here. Maybe we're trying to fix a corrosion issue, right? But why are we trying to fix that corrosion issue? What are we actually trying to do here? Maybe we're trying to transfer heat in the system. Well, maybe there's a better option. Maybe there's a different system we should be using. Ultimately, when we get caught in the tactical, sometimes we lose focus of the bigger picture. Okay, I changed this a little bit. It's adapted. It's the phrase is not actually armpits, but I think we all know what the phrase is. Opinions are like armpits. Everyone's got one. They all stink. We all think our opinion is the best opinion. We all think everybody gives bad advice, but not me. I don't give bad advice. My advice is good. My advice is wise. There's a great video out there called The Advice Monster by a man named Michael Bungay Stanier. It's a TED Talk. I think it's TEDx, actually. I highly recommend, if you need a good laugh later today, look up The Advice Monster. Just Google it. It's excellent. And it'll really show you why advice is so stinky. What are we saying when we give advice? We're saying, I know better than you. And so often when we hear the advice, it's like, but I already tried. That's obvious. Like, I already tried that. What do you think? I'm stupid? Like, there's something that says, I know better. And so often too, what ends up happening when there's a respect element there and a power differential is that people will hear the bad advice and it closes down the conversation, because they don't want to say, well, I tried that already, or that's not, that doesn't really work for me. So they just say, thank you. And they move on, and we lost the opportunity to have a deeper conversation. So what makes for good coaching? Curiosity. Curiosity is the #1 superpower of coaches, leaders, managers. I link to a download later in this presentation, and you can see the entire article I wrote about the superpower of curiosity. So anytime you're dealing with problem solving, the temptation to give advice, stay curious a little bit longer. That's something that MBS, or Michael Bungay Stanier, talks about a lot in his books and his videos. Just stay curious a little longer before you jump to the answer. Pull back, zoom out from what the what, from the how, and understand the what. So we just talked about that higher order goal. Partner in the problem solving. So a lot of times, especially when there's disagreement about how to move forward, we'll feel like the person sitting across from us is the one that we're in tension with, right? Like the antagonist, or our counterpart, when really we are on a team together and the problem is over there and we are working to solve that problem. So if we can pull back into problem solving mode and ask lots of really good questions, we're much more likely to diffuse defensiveness, check our own biases, which might jump in and try to solve the problem too quickly, and then we can be on a team together. This is really, really helpful even when there's huge disagreements, when we feel like we just don't see eye to eye or even have the same values. Getting clear on what's the problem we're trying to solve and how are we partnered against that problem over there. We're on the same side. The problem is on the other side. Asking open-ended questions. What is an open-ended question? It's something that you cannot answer with yes or no, or like just, it shuts it down. It's a one-word answer. So how, what, how might we do this? What would it look like? What are you feeling about this? What are some of your concerns about this? Those are all open-ended questions. What would a good outcome look like? One question that disguises itself as an open-ended question, but is really kind of a closed-ended question, or has the same impact as a closed-ended question, is why? And that seems strange, right? Like, why is a very scientific question? We all want to understand why. Well, every time my husband decides to do something that I've asked him to do, and I turn to him and I say, well, why did you do it that way? Um, Trust me, as the engineer asking, I genuinely want to know, but it doesn't come across that way, right? It doesn't come across as like, fascinating. Like, can you explain your ways to me? Because I want to improve how I do things. No, it comes across as judgy. So the why question, even when it's genuinely rooted in curiosity, can kind of shut that down and put people on the defense. So we can swap that out. Pretty much any why question can be asked a different way. Why did you do it that way? Walk me through your thought process. What did you consider when you were looking at this problem? What other options did you consider? What did you try that didn't work? But the why questions are tricky because it assumes that there was an obvious answer that somebody didn't choose, and that's why you're asking why. Yeah, so avoid the why trap. And then this is a classic question, and what else? You might think you got to the root of the issue here, but that and what else question, it's really a gem. You'll never know what comes out of it. And give people the space. Sometimes people will be looking out to the side, they'll be thinking, they'll be writing. Avoid the temptation to close the gap, to close the silence, and just ask, and what else? And let them think. And eventually they might be like, no, that's it. There's nothing else. Okay, great. We can move on. But when you say like, and what's the real problem here for you? And people think through it, and then you ask, and what else is the real problem here for you? And that Advice Monster video talks about that a lot. It's really a treat. Okay, so applications. I hear all the time, like, Erica, this sounds great, but I can't do it in my environment. So especially in like hierarchical command and control environments. I don't have time to ask all these questions, right? We just need to tell people what to do. Well, I assure you, I've worked in hierarchical command and control environments where people's lives are on the line, and we build it into the system, right? So emergency response, major emergency management, you have a checklist, and the last question is you go around the room and you give everybody you get everybody's updates on the evolving crisis or situation. The last question you ask is, and what have I missed? Because in those hierarchical environments, you're at even more risk for not hearing the quiet voices. So it's even more important that you elicit in an open-ended question, right? Notice I didn't say, did I miss anything? Because it's very easy to say no, and people just go to the easy answer there. No, I can't think of anything. Instead, it's what have I missed? Or what have we missed? What risks do we need to have on the radar, right? The other thing I just want to say, there we go. In hierarchical environments, sometimes it can feel uncomfortable if you are the leader and you're asking the opinion of the people who report to you. And so just understand that, embrace it, that it is your responsibility to make the decisions usually. And so you can say that out loud. I am going to make a decision here, right? And right now, I want you to give me all the information that you have so that I can make a fully informed decision, but I take responsibility for that. Sometimes people feel like you're deferring your responsibility if you start asking them lots of questions, and they feel like they might get thrown under the bus, or that you're not stepping into that leadership role. So owning it and saying, I'm going to take responsibility. Now you tell me, what are we missing? What do I need to know? When delegating, it's very powerful when delegating. This is a big skill that a lot of my leaders are working on. They say like, oh, I try to delegate stuff, and then if people just don't do it the way I expect, and then I have to do it all myself, right? Nope, that's not going to work. That is not sustainable. So in delegating, again, asking these questions, you might think you've explained it perfectly well, but that's not always the case. So you ask for a playback. What did you hear? What do you hear as the big goals here? What do you think the success criteria are? What will get in the way for you? Playing this forward, what will get in the way? What risks are you seeing that maybe I don't have on my radar? And then setting a check-in point. This is not necessarily about coaching, but setting a check-in point is hugely important for delegating, because then you get to empower that person, be hands-off, which is coach-like. Be hands-off. You have a designated check-in point where it's expected that you will give feedback. The feedback is not corrective. The feedback is expected and part of continuous improvement. And then you have time for an iteration because you plan that into the check-in. So you're not scrambling, everybody has the safety net under them, and then you can realize what you might have missed. Especially working across cross-cultural teams. Maybe you have an offshore team in, across the ocean. This can be really, really powerful because oftentimes it's seen as disrespectful to say, like, you weren't very clear. So can you clarify? And so, really giving people the space to do that and asking the questions that'll elicit it. When things don't go as planned, asking, like, what could have been better here? Not defaulting to sort of the thought terminating answer of people were just lazy or they were just incompetent. Like, where does that get you? It doesn't get you any further. But thinking, what happened in the system? Like, what did you need that you didn't have? What expectation did you have, or what was your understanding of what we were looking for? And then planning for the future. And then, learning practical coaching techniques. So, oh, oops, those are from the last slide. So ignore those. Okay. So this is my asterisk, right? Is like oh, this is a duplicate slide. Sorry, we all make mistakes. So this command and control, creating structure, taking responsibility, soliciting input. What have I missed? This is a slide I meant to show. Delegation and action plans. So the how versus the what. Like, are you caught up? It might be, oh, they didn't do it the way I wanted. Does the how matter, or is that a stylistic issue? Is it the what? Request the playback, brainstorm what barriers they're going to achieve so that you're not telling them, because that again puts them in receiving mode instead of brainstorming mode. And then set a check-in point, and then unmet expectations. Like, stay curious just a bit longer. There's so much to be gained if you could just stay curious and not jump to the judgment, and team up on that root cause failure analysis. Again, to use those engineering terms. Look at the systems factors. It's very rare that when people don't do what we expect them to do, that it was simply because they were a bad actor or they just wanted everybody to fail. Maybe it is a motivation issue, which I would define differently than laziness. I don't actually believe in laziness. I usually think that there are more helpful, root causes to understand. And then look forward. How are we going to avoid this in the future? Okay, this is where we get to the resources. So here are some books. The Coaching Habit is a great one. Humble Inquiry, Edgar Sheen, excellent book. Some of my coaching clients give that as a gift to first-time leaders, the Humble Inquiry book. Leadership development, so investing in your leaders, helping them to understand what coaching looks like. This is habit building, right? It takes time. These are things that we do without realizing. Setting this into performance expectations, right? Like, you get what you measure. You can look to the International Coaching Federation. They have a database of accredited coaches, which means that they are held to standards. They sit for exams, they are assessed, they have peer review, they have to continue up with their continuing educational credits. And then you can always bring in external accredited coaches. A lot of people can call them coaches. I am a bit of a stickler on this. I think it's really important to go through the formal training. Okay, and then I'll briefly skim through these and we're gonna hand it over to Q&A. What type of size or organization benefits from coaching? Literally all of them. Big three, Google, team of 5, a 2-person team, partners. My husband and I have benefited greatly from my coaching training. Can a manager be a coach? Like, yes and no. A manager can leverage coaching skills, right? But you, as a manager, are not an independent party. So just be really clear when you're using the coaching skills versus where you're wearing your manager hat. You're not independent. This is the issue with internal coaches as well. So internal coaches are not always independent. They might have context, but they might have other loyalties. And confidentiality is not always, even if confidentiality is stated, it's not always expected. Who has the time for all this? Like, these are so many questions. You know what? Who doesn't? Because who has the time to have all the answers and fix all the problems? That's my answer. Will there be feelings involved? Like, feelings are icky. I don't like to talk about feelings. We often treat feelings as data. So they can be informative one way or another, but like, everything in coaching is based on consent. I've had clients who are like, I don't talk about feelings, but I want to talk about how to lay some laminate flooring. You know what? Okay, if that's our in route in, we could talk about that. Usually though, once trust develops, then feelings can come to bear and we don't judge them. They are data. What if I can't find a coach who has expertise in my area? That's great, actually, because you know what? When I find a coaching problem, an engineering problem to solve, my engineering brain starts to kick in and I have to keep that at bay. Whereas if this is something that I have no experience with, like a lot of my Air Force clients right now, I'm like, you need to explain that acronym to me. I do not know what that means. But that's good because I stay above it all, right? I don't get in the box with them. Like I am asking the broad questions and they are topic agnostic. Does this work with, does this only work with leaders coaching their employees? Nope, you can do it reverse. You can reverse coach. You can use all of these. Think about it. Asking clarifying questions with your manager, it's a great way to manage upward. Getting to the heart of the matter. So you can even use it with your kids. Okay, here is the QR code to scan for a free download. It's just a sheet with my top 10 coaching questions that you can use on one side. And then on the other side, we've got some resources, some books, and that's, yeah, that's it. Okay.
Thank you so much, Erica. That I learned so much. You really opened my eyes. Opening up that conversation, I think, is key. And it's funny, the point that you made at the end, like with that client that like just doesn't want to talk about emotions, but wants to talk about laying laminate flooring. So selfishly, before we get to the questions, like what was that I just want to ask, like, can you delve into that process a little bit more? Like, how did you use that to enter the conversation?
Well, first of all, we tied it back to the big why of like, what makes this important to you? And then we were able to tie that into broader themes of like prioritization, task management, time allocation, you know, and what made it important was this person had dogs that they loved dearly. And so putting down the laminate flooring meant that the dogs could come inside in more rooms and spend more time with them, which meant that the time that he wasn't in the office was time that he, you know, really enjoyed more. So there was a big why underneath it. And then we got to talk about some bigger, broader topics with it.
Well, it's funny that you said, you know, the client came into the conversation saying he didn't want to talk about emotions or like feelings, but then like the result of asking those questions came, you know, it was very emotionally based or sourced.
Yeah, there's always a values piece to all of this. And that's where I think that the big why is so important. Like Simon Sinek talks about, you know, start with why, and we know this, but that bigger for each person. And that's why sometimes when we jump in and we assume we know what the bigger why is or what the bigger what is, we're solving for the wrong problem. And understanding how it ties to somebody's values is usually like a key component.
Mm-hmm. It's true, whether it's subconscious or conscious, right? Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for selfishly taking my question first, but it looks like we've got a few here in the chat. We'll go to Maiden Events, commented at 9:47. What is the greatest mistake that leaders make when giving professional feedback to team members?
Thank you for asking this question. Actually, I in the shower this morning, I was like, oh, talk about the, I'll say the poop sandwich, right? The feedback sandwich. Give a good thing, give a negative thing, give a good thing. No. So cognitive bias means that we are wired to weight negative feedback twice as heavily as positive feedback. So you've just wasted all the opportunity to give somebody positive feedback if you layer it in between, if you layer something constructive or negative in between. There are, you know, not safe for work terms for that sandwich that we refer to, but really the best thing to do is to separate that type of feedback into here's what's gone great, and then create an air gap, even if it's like the next day or whatever, and then have the constructive, here's what we want to see in the future that's oriented around growth. So I think that that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see. It's like such a terrible myth that has proliferated. I wish it would go away. Oh, one other thing, waiting till mid-year or year-end reviews. That is one of the best things that coaching culture can mitigate for. if somebody has a surprise in their mid-year or year-end review, frankly, that's a failure of the leader and not of the individual. So feedback should be continuous. It shouldn't be a big deal. It shouldn't be a weighty thing. That's the continuous improvement cycle.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you mentioned that the term air gap. So I think the biggest key factor here is like patience, right? And persistence. So understanding that, yes, the first conversation will address, good things, and then pause, take a moment, and then come back to that conversation, and then give some constructive, critiques or insight. So yeah, I mean, it's almost
the reverse.
Play the long game there, but it's worth it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I do think probably starting with the constructive is good, and then ending on the on here's what's going great and we want more of it. But it all should just be with the focus of and so what? And now what? Right? Not just like you did bad, but here's what we want to see in the future. We want to see more of this. We want to see less of this. So.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it's helpful. Okay, going back to the questions here. Our Legier Design said, what would you say is the most important single piece to take away from today's presentation?
Stay curious a little bit longer. Like, you don't have to have the answers. That is the hardest thing for people to understand, especially new leaders. They feel like they need to have the answers. And once we can get beyond that, I can't tell you how many times a leader will say, like, I've tried this and I've tried this and nothing seems to motivate this person. And when we stop and say, like, well, have you asked them? Which is a closed question, so it's not really a great question. But the answer is no, it didn't occur to me, right? Because we feel naturally that we are supposed to have the answers and we're supposed to figure it out ourselves. So that's, stay curious a little bit longer would be my single most important takeaway from today.
Thank you. I'll definitely take that with me. Here, we host so many wonderful trainings and events here at the Chamber, and we're consistently surveying our members to see what they think, of their experience. And like a lot of times, I find myself just doing exactly what you described. Like I want to find a solution as quickly as possible, and in my mind, that solutions should satisfy everyone, right? But that's just not really the case. And I think the point that you've made with like staying curious and kind of like looking at it more as a conversation, a continuous conversation, instead of just like these annual surveys that we send out and then we're going to take that solution and it's going to serve us all year round. No. It's probably not. It's likely not. And we serve a very diverse group of people here in the Portland region, and we need to continue asking the questions.
Yeah, I think that there's a piece too of self-awareness there around even recognizing your own reaction of like, oh, okay, here's a piece of feedback, I'm going to run with it. Or, oh, here's a piece of feedback, I didn't really like that. Like, I'm going to just whatever that self-reaction is. And like, again, creating an air gap and saying, oh, that was my reaction, but now what do I want my response to be, right? Like, what am I actually trying to do here? So again, pulling back to the goal, what are we actually trying to do here?
Mm-hmm. And it's so different. Going back to emotions, it's, I think, okay, I personally will say I pour a lot of my personal, I guess, passion into my job, that it's difficult to receive input in not a personal way when really it's just meant to be constructive and like helpful. What would you say, kind of switching to the opposite side, like receiving that information, what are like maybe a three, I'm not going to put a frame around you too much, but like a step process to do what you just said, like pause, receive, respond.
Yeah, definitely that awareness. Sometimes I'll ask clients, like, how aware are you in the moment that that the reaction is happening? We're often not, right? Like, think about road rage or just some little frustrating thing. Like, we react so quickly because that's what our brain is trying to keep us alive. And so creating that awareness of like, oh, I had a reaction. What does that mean to me? So feelings as data. What are these feelings telling me? It's hard to do this in the moment too, right? But like creating these habits and these strengths of, that hurt because it says, this is the story I'm telling myself about that feedback, right? I'm filling in a bunch of gaps. And pulling back to really focus on what can you take away from it? Not all feedback. This is the thing about feedback and advice, right? Like not all of it is accurate, but it is all informative in some way. So maybe it just tells you of how that person perceives you or a perception gap that you can then focus on rectifying. But bringing that conversation, then this is point number 3, is like bringing the conversation back to, okay, what would a good outcome look like for you, right? Then just refocusing the dialogue so that you don't need to be defensive or tell them like, I already got it, just thanks, but no thanks. Or just say like, you know, a lot of times we just say like, thank you for your input and we walk away. But digging a little bit more, like what would have made it good for you? Because a lot of times people give input or feedback without really thinking through whether it was just a preference of theirs or like what made them even think that they were the expert there. So getting as much information as you can so that then off to the side, you get to filter it through your own wisdom and take the action that's best for you.
That's a good point. Data collection is a very, even if it's like emotional, I think of life as basically data collection, right? Okay, how can I use this situation to serve me a little bit better in the future? So yes, thank you so much for giving us that insight and truly, I mean, for answering all of our questions, mine and members of the chat, answering their questions so thoroughly, Erica. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to ask too, if folks got the link, just because I can't see the chat right now, if folks got the link for that download, because that might be a helpful little like printout for you to keep off the side of your desk.
Yes, I see it right here. We added it to the chat a few minutes ago. Yep, there it is.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, folks are welcome to reach out to me with any questions or follow-up. I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Yeah, as Erica mentioned, she wants to hear from you. So please keep an eye on your email. We will be sending a follow-up with all that contact information, all the links, and so that you can reach back out to Erica after the event today. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you again, Erica, for your presentation, and thanks for engaging in the conversation during the Q&A. I also just want to thank my colleague, Riley Legier, for helping to produce yet another virtual event here at the Chamber. He is the man behind the curtain that no one ever sees, but he runs the show. And last but certainly not least, thank you, of course, to everyone who attended this morning. If you're interested in continuing the conversation with Erica, as I mentioned previously, you'll receive a follow-up message with links to all the resources mentioned during today's show, as well as her contact information. And last but certainly not least, of course, I want to give another shout out to our sponsor, Eaton Peabody, for their support of this series. The Eaton Peabody Growth Basics for Business series is typically held on the third, sometimes second, Tuesday of each month. And I'd like to invite you to join us again next month on Tuesday, March 18th for yet another informative training. If you're interested in presenting at Growth Basics for Business or know of an industry professional who may be interested, please visit our website, portlandregion.com, to submit an event proposal. Any questions, our team's direct contact information can be found there as well. So with that, thank you again for attending today's event. We'll see you next month here on Growth Basics for Business.